All right, cool. So I can play what's on the page. Now what? All right, let's take the chord changes from confirmation and actually try to learn how to improvise over them. You see, we're really good at taking vocabulary from an external source and then being able to play it, but now what do I do with it? Now I've got to actually learn how and why it works so that I can make it my own. You see, that's taking it to that next level, which is so important in order to become a better improviser. Okay, so let's get right to it. I'm going to take a couple of select bars, basically, from the first 8 measures. And I'm going to take the vocabulary that I've already come up with that I like, figure out why it works, and then try and make some variations on it so that I actually know how to use the vocabulary. So for example, let's look at, we're going to actually start at bar 2, the minor 2-5 that leads into this whole step descending sequence of 2-5-1s. We're going to isolate that 2-5, and then we're going to isolate the descending sequence. Now, our original piece of vocabulary, which I played in the very beginning there, is basically this. Now, of course, we need to know how those notes interact with the chords, but that's only the first step. So if we do that step, which is super important, we definitely want to know how those notes fit, because that leads us into a better understanding of how to then come up with our own vocabulary. For example, all right, we start on the A, that's the third, we go up the scale, up to the 7th, which is our high E on the tenor anyway. And then we land on the third, that D sharp, the third of the B7 chord, okay? And then we come down this descending scale, utilizing the flat 9. We're gonna get to why and how that all works. And then I've got this descending 5-3-2-1 on the 1 chord, which in this case is E minor for me. So B, G, F sharp, E. All right. Why does this sound good? Well, a couple of things. One, remember that voice leading is basically moving from one chord to the next, utilizing the chord tones on strong beats with the least amount of movement possible. So usually whole steps or half steps. So if we look at the and of 2 going into the downbeat of 3 there, we've got our E going to D sharp for tenor key, which is a 4-3. The third being the D sharp on the B7. Okay, great, awesome. So we've got this really strong voice leading by half step from a chord tone to another chord tone. That helps outline the harmony, awesome, but now what? All right, so what we wanna do now is basically try and replicate that type of movement in our own improvisation. Now, that's easier said than done, and I'll show you some examples of how we can get to that point. The other thing that I really want to point out is, what are my note choices? Now, on a minor 2-5, I like to use harmonic minor. The harmonic minor scale of the 1 chord, that is. And in this case, it's a 2-5-1 to D minor concert, or E for the tenor. So I'm going to utilize that E harmonic minor scale. I want to then basically stay within those notes for the most part, and that gives us a lot of material. But what separates somebody with more experience from somebody with less experience is, of course, how we use those notes and where we place them. And that leads us back to that voice leading with chord tones on downbeats. If I can get those notes from that E harmonic minor scale for me on the chord tones on those downbeats, I'm going to actually be conveying the harmony in a convincing way. So, for example, if I just improvise, and then we'll get into some examples. Now, there were a couple of passing notes in there, but for the most part, I was staying within the E harmonic minor scale. I think there was only one passing note in there, A to G sharp on that last one. But I've got in my ear, because I've done this a lot, I've got in my ear what that chord progression is sounding like in the underlying harmony. I'm sticking to those notes and I'm placing the chord tones on those downbeats. Now let's break that down and actually get into it. So if you look here, I've got number 1B here. It's basically a variation on 1A, which is the original lick that was played. Now, I'm starting off that phrase the same way because I'm really just trying to expand upon that. I'm trying to use a lot of the same material with some slight alterations, utilizing, of course, again, chord tones on downbeats, good voice leading, and then we've got our harmonic minor scale. So if I play 1B, check out that last bar there. That is straight up the harmonic minor scale. And why that sounds good is because that D sharp leading to the E is basically implying the 5 chord. And the 5 chord in this case for E minor is going to be B7. And what's our third? D sharp. So I'm really just making a 5-to-1 relationship within that one measure of that minor chord. That is how what we call tonicize or in this case, a minor chord. I'm doing 5-to-1, 5-to-1 within the line. That's why it sounds good. Now, that is the important thing that we have to remember is what is the underlying concept that actually makes this work? Because if I don't understand that, I can learn all of these licks, but none of that's going to translate when I go to improvise. That's the number one thing for the most part, and then sound and things like that I get asked is, okay, well, I've learned the transcription, I've learned the lick, okay, now what do I do with it? I don't know how to use it. Well, yes, you can regurgitate it, which is great, and that's part of the learning process, but this is where we really get into it. Okay, I'm doing that 5-to-1, B7 for me, to E minor. There's the relationship. If I think about B going to E, B going to E, back and forth, I can actually then kind of create a real strong minor sound. All right, I'm just doing B to E, okay? That's why it sounds good. All right, now that we know that, let's backpedal here a little bit to that first measure in 1B. Basically, on beat 3, I've got a chord tone, the root of the chord, B in this case, and I'm sticking to all chord tones on beats 3 and 4, and I'm still using that kind of scale stepwise motion that we saw in the first example, 1A. So bar 1 of number 1B would be... I wanted to point out that resolution there. That resolution, A, which is the 7th of B, to G, again, which is the 3rd of E, that voice leading is right there. So the underlying concepts of the voice leading with the chord tones on downbeats, and then what we call sort of this implied harmony or tonicization on the minor chord. That is what's going to lead me to be able to improvise more freely. Once I understand that concept, it's not a matter of learning a million licks. It's learning the sound and the concept and then just doing it, right? Now, of course, that takes time. Let's look at 1C. Right here, I start out on the 3rd again of that 2 chord. I do a descending motion to mix it up. I end up on a chord tone on beat 3, which is the F sharp or the 5th of the B7 chord. Notice leading in on the and of 4 of that first measure into the next measure, or 1 chord, I've got voice leading from 5 to 1, F sharp to E in this case. And then I just go right up that scale and really tonicize it. If I look at that last measure, right? There's no mystery there. There's no mystery. It's right there. Okay, let's play number 1C. Now, let's just, before we even go to number 1D, let's just take again those concepts. Okay, good voice leading, E harmonic minor for me, so harmonic minor scale of the 1 chord. And this notion or this idea of tonicization using 5-1 on the minor chord. If I kind of freely improvise in that way, you'll still be able to hear that I'm playing a minor 2-5. It's in there, okay? I only hit one note outside of that E harmonic minor scale, which was on that E minor. I played a D natural, which is just the natural 7. Let's look at number 1D. Here I've got a pattern that I've kind of done, which is what we might call a digital pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, or stepwise scale motion on each of the related chords. And then on the 2 and the 5, that is. And then on 1 chord, I go right to an arpeggio. Let's look at that 1 chord. Five to 1. Now, the 5 chord, when we're using a harmonic minor scale of the 1 chord, the 5 chord has the alterations. That's getting back to what I alluded to talking about, which is that flat 9 and actually flat 13. If I think about E harmonic minor, and again, you translate this to your key or any key, if I think about E harmonic minor, my G natural, or the flat 3rd, is the flat 13, G natural on a B7 chord. Okay, awesome, altered. And then my C natural, which would be my flat 6, making it harmonic minor, or one element to make it harmonic minor of my E harmonic minor. The C natural is the flat 9 of the B7. Again, a great way to stay within the scale and utilize what makes it sound like a minor 2-5 and what makes it sound good, hopefully. Now let's look at 1D. Okay, right there. Right there is a pattern in which we're going to get into when we talk about this descending whole step sequence of the 2-5, which is the next couple of bars of confirmation here. I've got a pattern that I set up an expectation, and that's when we get into more of the concepts of improvisation, the call and response, the expectation versus surprise, and that balance. Right now, I'm using a pattern that sets up an expectation that I basically fulfill, but if you really break it down, it is kind of a call and response. The first 2 beats establishes the call or the specific idea, in this case, a stepwise scale. And then the second 3 beats, or second half of that measure, beats 3 and 4, are actually another call, the same similar stepwise motion, just now to fit that specific chord. And then the response is something that is different or slightly different. So think about it. Call, call, response. Now we're getting into some of the elements of improvisation, which we'll cover in other videos. But basically, again, the voice leading, chord tones on downbeats, and then this harmonic minor scale or this tonality, and tonicizing 5 to 1. Again, on that 1 chord, I'm just really going up the elements of that B7 chord. The second half, the and of 1, right up that B7 chord. Let's look at the next couple of measures. So this is basically going to be measures 3, 4, and 5. check out my online community, Next Level Sax, where as a member, you get access to an exclusive variety of information, including videos, weekly PDFs, mini lesson videos, monthly jazz etudes, access to all of my books, digital courses, masterclasses, personalized feedback, and of course, a supportive community where you can ask specific questions. Just click the link below to go next level.